Hello. Hello, hello, hello. I really gotta learn to stretch before I unmute. Hello. How's it going? How you doing? How you doing? Hey. I am here and I had a croissant for breakfast because at Costco we bought a whole thing of croissants, and now I'm going to read The King in Yellow. Goodness gracious. Hello all. We have actually the text of the screen. We have the text on screen. I don't know why YouTube chat is still not working. It may be because it's members. I don't know what the deal with this is. Do you care more about it looking like this in this little lounge area, or do you care more about your chats being on screen? Because I can do either. I'm fine with whatever. You know I'm good for it. You know I'm here for you. You're fractious and unruly, thus you do not work. I'm sorry to hear that then. But yes, overwhelmingly, folks were interested in me reading The King in Yellow, which I can't say I was expecting. I have heard a lot of things about this. I know very little about it. All I really know is that it was like a contemporary of Lovecraft. It's not actually by Lovecraft. It is a collection of short stories. It looks like there is 10 of them. And someone in the comments, I believe, pointed out that The Mask and Rubery are the two best ones. So looking forward to that. My plan is one story a stream, but given by the fact that this is like 50 pages and also by the fact that this website, like this is public domain, it's over 100 years old, so Wikipedia just has it free online. It takes an hour and a half to listen to. My assumption is this will take me like 2+ hours. So because I want my Friday streams to be short, I might just call it. I might just like jump off after like part 2, depending on how long it's been. But my goal is to go through all of The King in Yellow, all 10 short stories, like once a week for the next couple weeks. This is gonna take a while, but it should be fun. Who's here? Speak up. So this is a members chat. If you're here watching after this has been released, everyone in chat is a member of the channel, but I make these VODs public once they are ended so that you can watch. You can, you don't need to subscribe or be a member. I think everyone should be able to engage with the community, but I wanted to do something nice for my members. So I started doing reading streams on Fridays. So I'm good to just hop into it. Welcome in Coid and Can. I don't know if Wumpus is here. I heard something about Wumpus on the Discord getting hacked. So if they show up, I might need to do something. But to start off, The Repairer of Reputations, the very first short story in The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers, which, fun fact, apparently Robert W. Chambers was known in his time as a romance author. And he did one weird thing writing The King in Yellow, where then that became his most well-known work. So maybe in my day-to-day, I normally do TTRPG stuff. Maybe I should do something really weird and out there so that in 100 years from now, someone can do react content to the video I made about the history of straws. But So apparently Wumpus got a new account because it was like a safety feature. I will secretly be known for epic rock opera. Well, so like unironically, yesterday and the day before, I got a DAW working again. I use Cakewalk by BandLab, and for the longest time, for like months, every time I tried to use it, it said, no, you need to activate this. And I'm like, I did activate it. I've signed in with my account, all of this, and it just wasn't working. I finally got it working the other day, and I actually just made another song. I didn't make a Kane song because for those of you who don't know, the music you're listening to right now is one that I made. I made this in the DAW. I also made like this one that I play all the time, mostly in like arrow answers in a lot of my shorts. This one was for a game jam. I made this one, which is like more heavy metal, kind of like on the rock side of things. And what I did is that there was a time you can't hear the music. It's just kind of one of it is just it's just quiet. So if I bump it up, so like now you should be able to hear. I like to keep it quiet so it's not obtrusive, but I like to keep it low enough that it will just be background noise. It won't actually get in the way of anything. But like, so I made this. Right, so I don't by any means claim to be a good composer, nor do I claim to be one of any skill, but I also made... And if you know Kane, I've talked about it on the channel plenty of times, that one I just played was based off the Hound, the one of the sin of violence, of vengeance, of hatred, of rage. This one is based off the Idol, which is all about desire, is all about wanting, is about recognition and attention. So I went for completely different vibes in them, but they're also like just they're basically garage band beats, right? They're nothing special. You wouldn't call it good, but it's definitely unnerving. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. I appreciate that you're just like, I wouldn't call it good. Okay, yeah, this one is supposed to be a club remix of something like Spooky Scary Skeletons. And then I have the Ogre theme, which is definitely the least musical. It's the most just ambient, which was fitting of the depression and the loss and the just darkness of the Ogre. So I've made a couple of these, although the track that I made yesterday was not actually related to this. I started the Centipede track months ago, and I wasn't able to finish it because I was not vibing with it, and then my DAW shut down. Now I have it back, so I'll probably jump back into that. My goal is that at some point I want to make the Centipede, the Toad, and the Lord music, and then like release them all as a video, right? Like the sound of sin. I think that would be really fun. But at least for now, we have the King in Yellow to worry about. Please make a Hope track full of whimsy. Okay, so I didn't quite do that. I did make a very anime sounding one though. If that is acceptable for you. The one that I made yesterday is probably the most upbeat, high energy, anime sounding track that I've made thus far. I can, if I stream deck. If I turn you off, I add you media source. Let me add this real quick. Where the heck did I put it? Oh, of course it's in my music, and it's in my original compositions, and it's there. It's very loud. Yeah, so I basically wanted to just make it the most anime nonsense track. So this is like the most hope-pilled that I could think of. It's so silly. I find it very funny, I must say. Explicitly because this is the sort of thing that like is totally out of type. Not just for me to make, but for me to listen to. But I was just like, how do I make this the most like anime OP, optimism, high energy, actual energy behind it, sort of music? And I found, it amuses me. Let me real quick. And I put you there. Sorry, I'm setting up a thing so I can actually use this. But yeah, so this is not a stream about my music. It's not a stream about my terrible, awful, no good, very bad music. This is a stream about horror, terror, the King in Yellow. Unrelated, but just thanks again for being so accepting of us. You and your community are awesome. This is the and of course can. Like, I make it very clear that what I want from my community is I want a bunch of people that are tolerant of one another, but are willing to like shoot each other in the face. And that's what I have. 24/7 live stream of this? What do you mean, like the music? Or also, hey extras, now scare our socks off? Yeah. This is the upbeat anime doctor starting his career in cat girl medicine, entering the hospital team. Listen, I've been listening to a lot of Vocaloid recently. Like, unironically, I've been listening to a lot of Miku, a lot of Teto. So I've just been in that anime headspace. Listen, a woe shoots you platonically. Nothing more terrifying has ever been uttered. But yes, so we're going to be reading King in Yellow. Goodbye, upbeat anime music. Let me turn you down a bit. Okay. We're going to turn you off. We're going to put on the spooky, scary music, and we're going to lock in. You had to handle animals? Oof. Hopefully good animals, not bad animals. But no, I do want, like, unironically, I want to make the other three sins. I want to make a track for each of them. I want to make a track for Cain, and then I think I could release those 7 songs, right? I could release those 7 songs as just one. If they're all 2 minutes, that'd be like a 15-minute video where it's just track after track after track. Hey, you can use it in your game if you want. You don't have to, but it might be fun. Is it okay to be anime in someone else's head? Oh my gosh. I'm anime in your head. I exist on the animated scene of reality. Yeah, as long as it's consensual or it's a prank. But Chapter 1, Book 1, Story 1 of The King in Yellow, The Repairer of Reputations. Along the shore, the cloud waves break. The twin suns sink behind the lake. The shadows lengthen in Carcosa. Strange is the night where black stars rise, and strange moons circle through the skies. But stranger still is lost Carcosa. Songs that the Hyades shall sing, where flaps the tatters of the king, must die unheard in dim Carcosa. Song of my soul, my voice is dead. Die thou, unsung, as tears unshed, shall dry and die in lost Carcosa. Casilda's song in The King in Yellow, Act 1, Scene 2. Okay, so I know The King in Yellow, in universe, in the stories, is a play that, like, drives you mad and obsessed with Carcosa. Like, that's all I know about this. I don't actually know much about The King in Yellow. You're now confronted with the thought of how many arrow kissers have aphantasia, so Arrow's not animating that. Listen, I don't have aphantasia. If I had the Death Note, I would be useless with it. The Repairer of Reputations. I could try to speak French. Ne rayons pas le feu, le foie du plus long temps que le nôtre. Voilà tout la différence. I don't even know if that's how you say it. Is this a T? Is this a U? A word? Probably toward. The King in Yellow is just Hamilton, but not real. Listen, Hamilton is not real. So you could say that Hamilton is like the King in Yellow, but not real. Toward the end of the year 1920, the government of the United States had practically completed the program, adopted during the last months of President Winthrop's administration. The country was apparently tranquil. Everybody knows how the tariff and labor questions were settled. A lot has not changed in 100 years, apparently, or 130 years, oh my gosh. The war with Germany, incident on that country's seizure of the Samoan Islands, had left no visible scars upon the Republic, and the temporary occupation of Norfolk by the invading army had been forgotten in the joy over repeated naval victories and the subsequent ridiculous plight of General von Gartenlaub's forces in the state of New Jersey. Wait, so this was written in 1895. Did they predict a U.S.-German conflict in the 20s? They were this close. Chambers, you were this close. You were 10 years off in both directions. You were so close. Okay, we don't know if it's Dirty Jersey. It's just New Jersey. Well, yeah, so everyone knew a conflict was happening, but unless you're misremembering, 95 was like 15 years before World War I, and like 20 years before the US got involved in World War I. And unless I'm mistaken, in World War I, the US didn't fight Germany that much. I think World War I, the US was overwhelmingly in a military logistics capacity assisting the was it the Entente? Because the Second World War was Allies versus Axis. The First World War was the Central Powers, was like the German bloc. And was it the Triple Entente versus the Central Powers? The US fought Germany a lot in Italy, some in France and Germany, and mostly Japan. In World War I? No visible scars is a funny way to put it. We covered up nuking paradise. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I suppose. Anyway. Yeah, so I'm talking World War I. I'm operating off the assumption of World War I because we're talking like in 1895, everyone saw a conflict coming, which would be World War I. But I'm speaking from the perspective of the US versus German in World War I. I know in World War II, obviously, across the entire Pacific theater, the US was everywhere. The US joined in the Western Front as well. BRB, there's a pale, angry face on the dirty dishes, so I must wash. Is it just your reflection? The Cuban and Hawaiian investments had paid 100%, and the territory of Samoa was well worth its costs as a coaling station. The country was in a superb state of defense. Every coast city had been well supplied with land fortifications. The army under the parental eye of the general staff, organized according to the Prussian system, had been increased to 300,000 men, with a territorial reserve of 1 million, and 6 magnificent squadrons of cruisers and battleships patrolled the 6 stations of the navigable seas, leaving a stream reserve amply fitted to control home waters. Leaving a steam reserve amply fitted to control home waters. The gentlemen from the West had at last been constrained to acknowledge that a college for the training of diplomats was as necessary as law schools are for the training of barristers. Consequently, we were no longer represented abroad by incompetent patriots. A lot has changed in 100 years. The nation was prosperous. Chicago, for a moment paralyzed after a second Great Fire, had risen from its ruins, white and imperial, more beautiful than the White City, which had been built for its plaything in 1893. Everywhere good architecture was replacing bad, and even in New York, a sudden craving for decency had swept away a great portion of the existing horrors. Streets had been widened, properly paved and lightened. Trees had been planted, squares laid out, elevated structures demolished, and underground roads built to replace them. The new government buildings and barracks were fine bits of architecture, and the long system of stone quays, which surrounded completely the island, had been turned into parks which provided a godsend to the populace. The subsidizing of the state theater and state opera brought its own reward. The United States National Academy of Design was much like European institutions of the same kind. Nobody envied the Secretary of Fine Arts, either his cabinet position or his portfolio. The Secretary of Forestry and Game Preservation had a much easier time, thanks to the new system of national mounted police. We had profited well from the latest treatises with France and England. The exclusion of the foreign-born Jews was a measure of national self-preservation. Wow, this was definitely written in 1895. The settlement of Swan, okay. The checking of immigration, the new laws concerning naturalization, and the gradual centralization of power in the executive all contributed to national common prosperity. Jeebus crisp. When the government solved the Indian problem and squadrons of Indian cavalry scouts in native costume were substituted for the pitiable organizations tacked on the tail of skeletonized regiments by a former Secretary of War, the nation drew a long sigh of relief. when, after the colossal congress of religions, bigotry and intolerance were laid in their graves, and kindness and charity began to draw warring sects together, many through the millennium had arrived, at least in the New World, which, after all, is a world by itself. Wow. 19th century American literature. Remember, bigotry is a thing of the past. Kindness and charity were our warring sects now. But don't worry, we don't have any foreign-born Jews. The Indian problem is solved. None of those are acceptable. None of those are good things. Also, as it stands, given that this is 19th century literature, actually, there might be a couple words that are like uh-ohs. I am reading a source text, so this is not for the sake of exploitation of anyone that may be affected. There may be some language that is not very cash money. Doing my best, I will try to avoid saying bad words, but I may accidentally say some stuff that is literal text in front of me. My apologies. Just letting you know, in case you are concerned that I will be supporting any problematic views. I'm not. Jews expelled, religious bigotry ended is wilding. Yes, it's 19th century American literature. Yeah, maybe make some substitutions by accident. Yeah, exactly. Like right there. I don't even know what else, because like I don't think I'm supposed to say like a new independent state of Suan. I don't know how I would substitute that though. I don't know. I'll try my best. My apologies if I said anything problematic. I'll just skip over words that I think I shouldn't say. But self-preservation is the first law, and the United States had to look on in helpless sorrow as Germany, Italy, Spain, and Belgium writhed in the throes of anarchy, whilst Russia, watching from the Caucasus, watching from the Caucasus, stooped and bound them up one by one. It certainly did. Not quite to the extent of Italy, or Spain, but definitely half of Germany. In the city of New York in the summer of 1899 was signaled by the dismantling of the elevated railroads. The summer of 1900 will live in the memories of New York for people many a cycle. The Dodd statue was removed in that year. In the following winter began that agitation for the repeal of the laws prohibiting suicide, which bore its final fruits in the month of April 1920, when the first governmental lethal chambers opened on Washington Square. What? I had walked down that day from Dr. Archer's house on Madison Avenue, where I had been a mere formality. Ever since that fall from my horse 4 years before, I had been troubled at times with pains in the back of my head and neck, but for now, months they had been absent, and the doctor sent me away that day saying there was nothing more to be cured in me. It was hardly worth his fee to be told that. I knew it myself. Still, I did not grudge him the money. What I minded was the mistake which he made at first, when they picked me up from the pavement where I lay unconscious, and somebody had mercifully sent a bullet through my horse's head. What? I was carried to Dr. Archer, and he, pronouncing my brain affected, placed me in his private asylum, where I was obliged to endure treatment for insanity. At last he decided that I was well, and I, knowing that my mind had always been as sound as his, if not sounder, paid my tuition, as he jokingly called it, and left. I told him, smiling, that I would get even with him for his mistake, and he laughed heartily and asked me to call once in a while. I did so, hoping for a chance to even up accounts, but he gave me none, and I told him I would wait. This is starting off significantly different than I thought it would. Well, so I know the Caucasus region is where we get the term Caucasian from. The Caucasus threw me off because it sounded, because like Caucasus is plural, but Caucasus is like sounds like a singular. I know the reasons why, but it's still wild how just murdering an animal is seen as mercy. Well, so I thought this was being sarcastic. I'm not gonna lie. I thought, oh, the merciful bullet sent through my horse's head. Unless it was like the horse broke its leg, and that's why the guy fell over. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm still thrown off by the we've removed all foreign-born Jews. Bigotry has been solved. Like, wow. Wow. The fall from my horse had fortunately left no evil results. On the contrary, it had changed my whole character for the better. From a lazy young man about town, I'd become active, energetic, temperate, and above all, ambitious. There was only one thing which troubled me, and I laughed at my own uneasiness, and yet it troubled me. During my convalescence, I had brought and read for the first time The King in Yellow. Sorry, I thought I had the pointing soy jack on this scene. I don't. But that's the thing we're reading. Bro hit his head, lost his horse, and couldn't get away with being lazy anymore. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, horse leg injuries are physically impossible to set without a high... Yeah. They're super dangerous, which is why horse racing is actually really dangerous for the horse. And horse... What would we call it? Like vaulting? Like horse races that involve jumping over obstacles are one of the highest fatality rates for jockeys and horses alike, because if a horse jumps over something and lands funny, it will break its leg, fall over, and get in the way of other horses, where you as a jockey are then on the ground as a bunch of horses are jumping down on your space. So you and the horse are probably going to die if the horse doesn't land properly, which when you're going for speed over safety, you're probably not going to land right. Even if it's 1 out of 10 times, a given race will have 14 horses. So it's going to be like one very bad circumstance a race on average. I remember after finishing the first act that it occurred to me that I had better stop. I started up and flung the book into the fire. Bro, was everyone in the 19th century just rich? If I don't like a book, I'm not throwing it in my fireplace. I'm like donating it or saving it for later to finish at another time. I don't have the money to just pick up The King in Yellow and then burn it. If anything, I'm going to the library. I'm picking it up from the library. Who do you think you are, man? The volume struck the barred grate and fell open on the hearth in the firelight. If I had not caught a glimpse of the opening words in the second act, I should never have finished it. But as I stooped to pick it up, my eyes became riveted to the open page, and with a cry of terror, or perhaps it was a joy so poignant that I suffered in every nerve, I snatched the thing out of the coals and crept shaking to my bedroom, where I read it, and I reread it, and wept and laughed and trembled with a horror which at times assails me. This is the thing that troubles me, for I cannot forget Carcosa, where black stars hang in the heavens, where the shadows of men's thoughts lengthen in the afternoon, where the twin suns sink into the lake of Hali, and my mind will bear forever the memory of the pallid mask. I pray God will curse this writer, as the writer has cursed the world with this beautiful, stupendous creation, terrible in its simplicity, irresistible in its truth. A world which now trembles before The King in Yellow, where the French government seized the translated copies, which had just arrived in Paris, London, and of course, became eager to read it. It is well known how the book spread like an infectious disease, from city to city, from continent to continent, barred out here, confiscated there, denounced by press and pulpit, censored even by the most advanced of literary anarchists. No definite principles had been violated in those wicked pages, no doctrine promulgated. No doctrine promulgated, no convictions outraged. It could not be judged by any known standard yet, although it was acknowledged that the supreme note of art had been struck in The King in Yellow. All felt that human nature could not bear the stain, nor thrive on words in which the essence of purest poison lurked. The very banality and innocence of the first act only allowed the blow to fall afterward with all more awful effect. Not arrow cute, no. Listen, I feel bad about getting rid of books in the current day too. Also, let me hit up a question for a literary anarchist. If a book had bad vibes, like super bad vibes. Like it's a stain on humanity. Bad vibes. Would you, as a literary anarchist, push for it to be censored? Also, this is the 20th, this is the 18th century, and I think you're French. Please respond quickly. It's urgent. Okay. No. See, I do love, I do like that I started this up. I'll just DM people I know random thoughts I have, and if they get back to me, I get to make content out of it. No, I said 19th century. Oh wait, never mind, it is 19th. You're right, I said 18th, my mistake. I was gonna say 19th and then I confused it with the 20th century. Thank you, my mistake. I know, I'm wrong. Hi, EJ. You just missed me, we solved bigotry. That's what's happened thus far. Oh my gosh, we're like, wait, is this a page? Are we on page 14 already? Yeah, okay. Oh, this isn't that bad. This is why it's so weirdly formatted. You missed Arrow having issues saying the word promulgated? Yeah, and shut up. The fall from my horse had fortunately left no evil results. Promulgation is not an evil result. My favorite century because I had trains and electricity and astronomy and the chauvinism. You like Harrison Armory, don't you? Oh, he responded. Controversial opinion, but no, loudly speak against it, but I'm an extremist with censorship. Wait, where was it? No, you don't understand. You don't understand. It was censored even by the most advanced of literary anarchists. So, like, you gotta. I'm sorry, I got distracted by bothering my friend. For those of you who don't know, a archivist, he is a anarchist punk, and he says, controversial opinion, but no, loudly speak against it. I'm an extremist with censorship. Okay, he says, I would need more details, but also I've been on AO3. Ah, understood. Okay, so apparently the answer is if you've been on AO3, nothing in the King in Yellow is worse than AO3. No, I like it, SSC, but HA is a cool neutral party. Okay, HA is the military-industrial complex. I like twist them into a super corporatized, sanitized version of themselves. Fair. I've been tainted because now I can only think of Lovecraftian horrors as waifus. Have you played, like, Sucker for Love? Is that what did that to you? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna get back to my reading, my work. Tentacular Day. As well as there's Lovecraftian anime girls? Do I need to keep on safe search for this? Like this? Like this? Not on stream? Why? Why is this a problem? Am I gonna see something bad? But like, it can't be that bad. The Merryweather one? Who? I don't know what that means. Like, is it Lovecraft? Oh, it's a webtoon. Oh, got it. I kind of like see her face. It's like peeping out. Like, Gotta see some bops and bops. What are bops? Is this something I should not be looking at? Okay, I'm gonna go back to reading my book where we solved bigotry. It was, I remember, the 13th day of April, 1920, the first government lethal chamber was established. Was established on the south side of Washington Square between Worcester Street and South 5th Avenue. The block, which had formerly consisted of a lot of shabby old buildings used as cafes and restaurants for foreigners, had been acquired by the government on the winter of 1898. I see where this is going. Oh no. The French and Italian cafes and restaurants were torn down. The whole block was enclosed by a gilded iron railing and converted into a lovely garden with lawns, flowers, and fountains. In the center of the garden stood a small, white building, severely classical in architecture, and surrounded by thickets of flowers. 6 Ionic columns supported the roof, and the single door was out of bronze. A splendid marble group of the Fates stood before the door. The work of a young American sculptor, Boris Yvain, who had died in Paris when only 23 years old. The inauguration ceremonies were in progress as I crossed University Place and entered the square. I threaded my way through the silent throng of spectators, but was stopped at 4th Street by a cordon of police. A regiment of United States Lancers. Lancer Mansion? This is Harrison Armory. Were drawn up in a hollow square around the lethal chamber. On a raised tribute facing Washington Park stood the governor of New York, and behind him were grouped the mayor of New York and Brooklyn, the inspector general of police, the commandant of the state troops, Colonel Livingston, military aide to the president of the United States, General Blount, commanding at Governor's Island, Major General Hamilton, commanding the garrison of New York and Brooklyn, Admiral Buffby of the fleet in the North River, Surgeon General Lansford, the staff of the National Free Hospital, Senators Wise and Franklin of New York, and the Commissioner of Public Works. The tribune was surrounded by a squadron of hussars from the National Guard. Did we need to know any of this? Did we need to know any of this? Will Major General Hamilton, commanding the garrison of New York and Brooklyn, is he going to come up again? Or is this just dropping names? The winged hussars arrive. Sorry, I immediately thought of the Sabaton song. The governor was finishing his reply to the short speech of the Surgeon General. I heard him say, "The laws prohibiting I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this word, right? I don't even know if I'm allowed to say this on YouTube. So if what we could do, I could do the whole like unalive comment. I could do a dramatic reading of The King in Yellow where every time they mention the S word, I say unalive. The laws prohibiting unaliving oneself. Because like I have to deal with the YouTube algorithm. I can't say it. It world builds. Well, yes, so it has military commands like that even in peacetime. That is a fair point. And that like this is military, commandant of state troops, military aid, commander of commanding at Governor's Island, commanding the garrison. Like this is a militarized US that is very, very anti-immigration, very anti-foreigner. It is very like prioritizing what it sees as an ideal core America, which again, a lot has changed in 100 years. Yes, this is a member stream. This is members only chat, but once the stream is over, I will unmembership it and make it public for everyone. So if you are watching this after it has gone live, sorry that you couldn't chat because you weren't a member, but you should still be able to participate in the community. You can still listen to this in the background, and you can still have me struggle to say freaking like proclamation as much as you want. A sewer slide made you think of something radically different, yeah. The laws prohibiting unaliving oneself and providing punishment for any attempt at self-destruction have been repealed. The government has seen fit to acknowledge the right of man to end an existence which may have become intolerable to him through physical suffering or mental despair. It is believed that the community will be benefited by the removal of such people from their midst. Since the passage of this law, the number of unalivings in the United States has not increased. now that the government is determined to establish a lethal chamber in every city, town, or village in the country. Wow. It remains to be seen whether or not that class of human creatures from whose desponding ranks new victims of self-destruction fall daily will accept the relief thus provided. Holy heck. It remains to be seen whether or not that class of human creatures from whose desponding ranks new victims of self-destruction fall daily will accept the relief thus provided. Wow! It is kind of like Futurama. But like... So now I'm less inclined to think that it's Chambers being anti-Semitic or bigoted or whatever, and more a satire of the atmosphere that Chambers was seeing of the world and the U.S. in 1895. Because this went from, oh, if you told me unironically that you as a random person from 1895 thought that bigotry was ended while doing these other things that definitely was not ending bigotry, I would just believe you. But now, to the extent that it's gone, I understand that the setting as a whole has shifted into a much more autocratic, authoritarian, and anti-individualistic culture, which means that the stuff leading up to it, because it was, for me, in my perspective, looking back on the 19th century, it makes sense that a random person might believe that, despite the fact I find it problematic now. I think that that was actually a narrative device to kind of, like, almost like the road to hell, one step at a time, where it is not reasonable to do that now, but it was more expected that folks would find that reasonable in 1895, and then it gets worse and worse and worse, which, like, okay, wild start to the King in Yellow. I will say, I was not expecting the alternate reality where the US becomes a military state where lethal chambers are opened everywhere. He paused and turned to the white lethal chamber. The silence in the street was absolute. There, a painless death awaits him who can no longer bear the sorrows of this life. If death is welcome, let him seek it there. Then, quickly turning to the military head of the president's household, he said, I declare the lethal chamber open. And again, facing the vast crowd, he cried in a clear voice, Citizens of New York and of the United States of America, through me the government declares the lethal chamber to be open! The solemn hush was broken by a sharp cry of command. The squadron of hussars filed after the governor's carriage. The lancers wheeled and formed along Fifth Avenue to wait for the commandant of the garrison, and the mounted police followed them. I left the crowd to gape and stare at the white marble death chamber and, crossing South Fifth Avenue, walked along the western side of that thoroughfare to Bleecker Street. Then I turned to the right and stopped before a dingy shop which bore the sign, Hochbert Armorer, Harrison Armory. Is this satire, or did people actually believe this this heinous thing is a common game I find myself in playing with old text? See, here's the thing. I was fully accepting to be like, hey, product of its time, that's not okay. I'll just have to work with that. But it's made more and more clear in the following pages that it's just like, nah, not really. It's worse. King in Yellow is much more like a cutie in yellow with hair. How dare you? Also, while there's an opening of a sewer slide chamber, no, it opened with saying, don't worry, we solved bigotry by removing all foreign-born Jews, which is a wild opening, I must say. There was a state exclusive to a term for black people that I'm not allowed to say. Remember, bigotry is solved. Oh my gosh. I glanced in at the doorway and saw Hochbert busy in his little shop at the end of the hall. He looked up and, catching sight of me, cried his deep, hearty voice, Come in, Mr. Castigain. Constance, his daughter, rose to meet me as I crossed the threshold and held out her pretty hand, but I saw the blush of her disappointment on her cheeks and knew it was another Cascade she had expected. My cousin Louis. I smiled at her confusion and complimented her on the banner which she was embroidering from a colored plate. Old Hawkbert sat riveting the worn greaves of some ancient suit of armor, and the ting, ting, ting of his little hammer sounded pleasantly in the quaint shop. Presently, he dropped his hammer and fussed about for a moment with a tiny wrench. The soft clash of the mail sent a thrill of pleasure through me. ASMR? Ayo? I loved to hear the music of steel brushing against steel, the mellow shock of the mallet on thigh pieces, and the jingle of chain armor. Listen, if you want to talk about a cutie, I want fan art of me in, like, just full plate mail. We've made jokes about it. People have said they want to see me in full plate mail, and I said, okay, bet. I can just drop a PNG of plate mail in front of myself. But I heard metal thighs, and I was like, oh, some of you would go wild. Eldritch ASMR, exactly. Stimming with a hammer is real. Listen, if I can stim because I touched my... Oh my gosh, my desk is cold. If I can stim because I touched my desk and it's colder than I expected, and I get distracted and I have a factory reset because I'm just touching my desk because it's cold, you can stim with a hammer. I'm with you on that. That was the only reason I went to see Hawkbert. He had never interested me personally, nor did Constance, except for the fact of her being in love with Louis. This did occupy my attention and sometimes even kept me awake at night. But I knew in my heart that all would come right, and that I should arrange their future as I expected to arrange that of my kind doctor, John Archer. However, I should never have troubled myself with visiting them just then, had it not been, as I say, that the music of the tinkling hammer had me for this strong fascination. Oh, so you're artistic. That's fine, dude. Cast again. That's okay. I know it's the 20th century, but you can stim. You can listen to ASMR and get those tingles. I would sit for hours, listening and listening, and when a stray sunbeam struck the inland steel, the sensation it gave me was almost too keen to endure. My eyes would become fixed, dilating with a pleasure that stretched every nerve almost to breaking, until some movement of the old armor cut off the ray of sunlight, and then, still thrilling secretly, I leaned back and listened again to the sound of the polished rag, swoosh, swoosh, rubbing rust from the rivets. Constance worked with the embroidery over her knees, now and then pausing to examine more closely the pattern and the colored plate from the Metropolitan Museum. Who is this for? I asked. No, the cold desk returns. Imagine cold steel on your inner thigh, though. I mean, I was about to say I don't have to imagine that, but I do, because I don't have cold steel on me right now. But, like, so fun fact, did you know this? With armor, with plate mail, and also chainmail, you would wear a gambeson or padded armor under the metal, which would not only provide shock absorption, would not only fill out the physical frame of the armor, because the armor would often be larger than you, particularly for something like plate or breastplate. It would also provide kinetic shock resistance. If you got hit by a maul or a mace, that was really good at crushing plate. And the way to prevent that from just getting punctured by bent-in armor is that you had reinforced leathered layer. Layered leather. You would have a gambeson. You would have padded armor. You would have layers of wool padding out the inside of your armor. So that if you got hit by something, it would just dent into that. If you got stabbed by something, and you had chainmail, for instance, it would be caught on the chainmail, and then it would be stuck in your padded armor. Padded armor is actually very difficult to cut through, surprisingly, particularly if it's well treated and it's well made. It's not as good as a sheet of metal, but it is better than, like, fantasy gives it credit for. A gambeson by itself was really good armor. A gambeson with chainmail, which just mail is generally chainmail, but it's more flow to say chainmail. Mail on a gambeson was actually what most knights were wearing for most of their existence up until the advent of plate mail, which was around the advent of firearms in the 13th, 14th century. So you have, for most of the Middle Ages, for like King Arthur's time, there was gambesons, chainmail, maybe breastplates were developed. I'm not sure on that, but full plate mail was only developed around the time of firearms, and then plate mail continued to be used up through the 17th century because despite the fact it was so inconvenient to wear, despite the fact that plate mail took so much time to not just maintain, but also put on physically, it was heavy, you would sweat in it because it was hot, it limited visibility, not so much movement because it was like tens of pounds but distributed across your entire body, so it wasn't actually that bad. It was kind of like wearing, I guess the best comparison might be scuba gear, where that does limit your mobility, but it doesn't stop you from running. It's just kind of inconvenient compared to not wearing anything at all. It only stopped getting worn once the negatives of trying to put it on and wear it and keep it on outweighed the benefits of protecting you, which really only happened when firearms developed past fuselage and like buckshot. Once we started getting into more 17th, 18th century levels of like Revolutionary War muskets that could punch through metal, that's when you started getting, okay, we're going to stop wearing armor. But up until that point, back when you had pike and shot formations, yeah, you'd wear armor if you could afford it because it was effective against pike and shot. Love the ramble. I'm sorry for rambling. Yeah, armor works. Armor left us only with the advent of like flintlock muskets and better gunpowder. Less because it couldn't protect, more because arming 100,000 musketeers is expensive. Exactly. And that's why what has kind of developed into modern armor is chest piece helmet, right? Think about your standard like 21st century military gear. You have plates on your chest. You have a helmet to protect your head. Maybe you have some degree of camouflage. Maybe you have some degree of not anti-ballistic protection, but you'll have like anti-shrapnel guarding on your arms and legs, your limbs. Broadly speaking, though, chest head. We're back to basics because we're at a scale of combat where it's unreasonable to get thousands of people in metal suits. And then now we're at a point where if you have someone with a suit of plate mail, or maybe even some modern interpretation of plate mail that utilizes like modern like plating, but across the entire body, I don't think that would stick up to like an M4 or like a SPAS 12. I mean, honestly, even like a Desert Eagle. Even like it would probably be able to stop a 9mm, but I don't think anything of a higher caliber or penetrative value it would be able to stop. Not to mention, oh, you have people walking around in armor, they're slower, they're more noticeable. Drone strike and or anti-armor. We have anti-armor rounds now. We have anti-armor explosives. We have IEDs, which is more of a threat to you if you can't effectively maneuver around them than if you could. So even if you could develop it in the modern day, it just makes more sense to protect torso, head. Once again, we return to the Landsknecht, my beloved. Okay. They, from what I'm aware, unless I'm thinking the wrong thing, were they not Swiss mercenaries that were like in full armor with like pike and shot? We have plates that can stop up to 50 cal at range. Oh, okay, yeah, but it'll like crack your sternum. Well, I mean, that's the thing, right? The goal of modern, because we have advanced weaponry so much, the goal of modern armor is less protect you from harm and more save your life. If you get shot with a bulletproof vest, which I don't even think they're allowed to be called bulletproof, I think they have to be called bullet resistant at this point, because if you get shot at range in the chest, you will probably break multiple ribs. Like maybe you will have internal bleeding depending on the caliber and how much you got shot, and also like what plates you have, like if you have level 4 or level 3 or whatever. But when you get shot, that's never going to be pleasant. It's never going to be like in the movies where you just kind of like get knocked down and then you get back up. It's always going to have some lasting damage no matter where you get shot. A quick flamberge or estoc? Okay, the flamberge is so funny. But unironically, I played a lot of Dark Souls 1 with the estoc, so I have a fondness for the estoc. Also, hey Samuel, welcome on in. German mercenaries with helmets and torso armors, they were all about speed. Oh, they're German. They're German. Well, I was thinking of the Swiss. Why was I thinking? Huh. The best armor against anything in the modern day is a drone operator in your squad. Second best is a shotgun. Third is a foxhole. Okay, back to the King in Yellow. Remember, we solved bigotry. We've solved the problem of... We solved mental health. Because now we have lethal chambers. And we have a stimming ASMR enthusiast of a protagonist. Who may or may not be autistic. Who's this for? I asked. Hawberk explained that in addition to the treasures of armor in the Metropolitan Museum, of which he had been appointed armorer, he also had charge of several collections belonging to rich amateurs. This was the missing greave of a famous suit, which a client of his hand traced to a little shop in Paris called the Quai d'Orsay. He, Hawberk, had negotiated for and secured the greave, and now the suit was complete. He laid down his hammer and read me the history of the suit, traced from 1450 onward from owner to owner until it was acquired by Thomas Stainbridge. When his superb collection was sold, this client of Hawberk's bought the suit, and since the search for the missing greave had been pushed until it was, almost by accident, located in Paris. Did you continue the search so persistently without any certainty of the greave still being in existence? I demanded. Of course, he replied coolly. Then, for the first time, I took a personal interest in Hawberk. Yowie. It was worth something to you, I ventured. No, he replied, laughing. My pleasure in finding it was my reward. Have you no ambition to be rich? I asked, smiling. My own one ambition is to be the best armorer in the world, he answered gravely. Constance asked me if I had seen the ceremonies at the lethal chamber. She herself had noticed cavalry passing up Broadway that morning and had wished to see the inauguration, but her father wanted the banner finished, so she stayed at his request. Did you see your cousin, Mr. Castigain, there? She asked, with the slightest tremor of her soft eyelashes. No, I replied carelessly. Louis's regiment is maneuvering out in he's in the military. Westchester County. I rose and picked up my hat and cane. Are you going upstairs to see the lunatic again? Laughed old Hawberk. If Hawberk knew how I loathed that word lunatic, he would never use it in my presence. It rouses certain feelings within me, which I do not care to explain. However, I answered him quietly. I think I shall drop in and see Mr. Wilde for a moment or two. Poor fellow, said Constance with a shake of her head. It must be hard to live alone year after year, poor, crippled, almost demented. It's very good of you, Mr. Cascane, to visit him as often as you do. I think he's vicious, observed Hawberk, beginning again with his hammer. I listened to that golden tinkle on the greaves plates. When he finished, I replied, No, he is not vicious, nor is he the least demented. His mind is a wonder chamber, from which he can extract treasures that you and I would give years of our lives to acquire. Hawberk laughed. I continued a little impatiently. He knows history as no one else could know it. Nothing, however trivial, escapes his search, and his memory is so absolute, so precise in details, that were it known in New York that such a man existed, the people could not honor him enough. Nonsense, muttered Hawberk, searching on the floor for a fallen rivet. It is nonsense, I asked. Oh, sorry. Is it nonsense? I asked, managing to suppress what I felt. Is it nonsense when he says the tassets and cassards of the enameled suit of armor, commonly known as the Prince's Emblazoned, can be found amongst a mass of rusty theatrical properties, broken stoves, and ragpecker's refuse in a garret in Pell Street? Hawberk's hammer fell to the ground, but he picked it up and asked, with a great deal of calm, how I knew that the tassets and left cussard were missing from the Prince's Emblazoned. I did not know until Mr. Wilde mentioned it to me the other day. He said they were in the garret of 998 Pell Street. Nonsense, he cried, but I noticed his hand trembling under his leather apron. Is this nonsense too? I asked pleasantly. Is it nonsense when Mr. Wilde continually speaks of you as the Marquis of Avonshire and of Miss Constance? I did not finish, for Constance had started to her feet with terror written on every feature. Hawberk looked at me and slowly smoothed his leather apron. That is impossible, he observed. Mr. Wilde knows a great many things about armor and the Prince's Emblazoned, for instance. I interposed, smiling. Yes, he continued slowly. About armor, maybe, but he is wrong in regard to the Marquis of Avonshire, who, as you know, killed his wife's transducer years ago and went to Australia, where he did not long survive his wife. Mr. Wilde is wrong, murmured Constance. Her lips were blanched, but her voice was sweet and calm. Let us argue, if you please, that in the one circumstance, Mr. Wilde is wrong, I said. Okay, so Mr. Wilde, everyone thinks he's crazy, but he actually knows stuff. He has precognition and or is just really smart. Knows a bunch of stuff. Cool. Apparently, this dude is the Marquis of Avonshire, and Miss Constance is something special. I assume Mr. Wilde read The King in Yellow, right? Because we start this where the main character, Mr. Castigain, read The King in Yellow. Where did he read it? Yeah, so during my convalescence, I bought and read for the first time The King in Yellow. I think that the King in Yellow is a cognito hazard. I know that. So I don't know if that's related. Constance is a blacksmith's daughter, so 80% chance of tomboy. Very true. You're pretty sure that Hawberk is a dude and Constance is his daughter who is engaged to Louis. So I don't think they're engaged. So Constance is the daughter of Hawberk. Hawberk is a armorer who apparently works for the nearby museum, but also for private clients. And Castigain is the main character. Castigain was in a mental asylum for a while because when his horse got shot, he got injured and got sent to a mental hospital in addition to recovering his physical injuries. So now he wants revenge against Dr. Archer, who was his doctor, but his cousin, Louis, is someone that Constance is in love with, and Castigain, the main character, seems upset by this for whatever reason. Also, bigotry has been solved. That's what I've learned thus far. The King in Yellow is close, but not a meme yet. Yeah. I climbed the 3 dilapidated flights of stairs, which I had so often climbed before, and knocked at a small door at the end of the corridor. Mr. Wilde opened the door, and I walked in. When he had double-locked the door and pushed a heavy chest against it, he came and sat down beside me, peering up into my face with his little light-colored eyes. Half a dozen new scratches covered his nose and cheeks, and the silver wires which supported his artificial ears had become displaced. I thought I'd never seen him so hideously fascinating. He had no ears. The artificial ones, which now stood out at an angle from the fine wire, were his one weakness. They were made of wax and painted a shell pink, but the rest of his face was yellow. He might better have reveled in the luxury of some artificial fingers for his left hand, which is absolutely fingerless, but it seemed to cause him no inconvenience, and he was satisfied with his wax ears. He was very small, scarcely higher than a child of 10, but his arms were magnificently developed, and his thighs as thick as any athlete. Okay, so if you were here on Wednesday, I played a demo called Aether and Iron, and I manifested Yuri into it. I made a joke about Yowie earlier. I think I manifested Yowie. There is no heterosexual explanation for why he's talking about his arms and legs like this. Still, the most remarkable thing about Mr. Wilde was that a man of his marvelous intelligence and knowledge should have such a head. It was flat and pointed, like the heads of many of those unfortunates whom people imprison in asylums for the weak-minded. Many called him insane, but I knew him to be as sane as I was. That's a clever bit of writing, because I think our protagonist is not fully sane. I think our protagonist has some mental difference, whether this is actually just autism or whatever, or if it is sociopathy or psychopathy, because he seemed to have no real connection to the people downstairs. He only cared about the armoring. So, interesting. I'm getting a little bit of a I have no mouth and I'm a Scream vibe, in that the main character claims to be sane but isn't. And it's only by subtext that you can pick up on that. Like, maybe he is sane, but I don't know. I like that line. A thick old man has thick old thighs. Yeah, bro has thick thighs canonically. I do not deny that he was eccentric. The mania he had for keeping the cat and teasing her until she flew at his face like a demon was certainly eccentric. I never understood why he kept that creature, nor what pleasure he found in shutting himself up in his room with his surly, vicious beast. I remember once, glancing up from the manuscript I was studying by the light from some tallow dips, and seeing Mr. Wilde squatting motionless on his high chair, his eyes fairly blazing with excitement, while the cat, which had risen from her place before the stove, came creeping across the floor right at him. Before I could move, she flattened her belly to the ground, crouched, trembled, and sprang into his face. Howling and foaming, they rolled over and over on the floor, scratching and clawing, until the cat screamed and fled under the cabinet, and Mr. Wilde turned over on his back, his limbs contracting, curling up like the legs of a dying spider. He was eccentric. Mr. Wilde had climbed into his high chair and, after studying my face, picked up a dog-eared ledger and opened it. Henry B. Matthews, he read. Bookkeeper with Wysott and Company, dealers in church ornaments, called April 3rd, reputation damaged on the racetrack, known as Welcher, reputation to be repaired by August 1st, retainer $5. He turned the page and ran his fingerless knuckles down the deep, closely written columns. P. Green Dussenberry, minister of the gospel, Fair Beach, New Jersey. Reputation damaged in the Bowery, to be repaired as soon as possible. Retainer $100. He coughed and added, called April 6th. Then you are not in need of money, Mr. Wilde, I inquired. Listen. He coughed again. Mrs. C. Hamilton Chester of Chester Park, New York City, called April 7th. Reputation damaged at Dieppe, France, to be repaired by October 1st. Retainer $500. Note, C. Hamilton Chester, Captain USS Avalanche, ordered home from South Sea Squadron October 1st. Well, I said, the profession of a repairer of reputations is lucrative. His colorless eyes sought mine. I only want to demonstrate that I was correct. You said it was impossible to succeed as a repairer of reputations, this is the title of the chapter. This is the title of the short story. The King in Yellow is a series of short stories. The repairer of reputations is that first one. Not $5,000, $500. However, $500 in 1895. You said it was impossible to succeed as a repairer of reputations, that even if I did succeed in certain cases, it would cost me more than I would gain by it. Today, I have 500 men in my employ who are poorly paid, but who pursue the work with an enthusiasm which possibly may be born of fear. These men enter every shade and grade of society. Some even are pillars of the most exclusive social temples. Others are the prop and pride of the financial world. Still others hold undisputed sway among the fancy and the talent. I choose them at my leisure from those who reply to my advertisements. It is easy enough. They're all cowards. I could treble the number in 20 days if I wished. So you see, those who have in their keeping the reputations of their fellow citizens, I have in my pay. They may turn on you, I suggested. He rubbed his thumb over his cropped ears and adjusted the wax substitutes. I think not, he murmured thoughtfully. I seldom have to apply the whip, and then only once. Besides, they like their wages. How do you apply the whip? I demanded. His face for a moment was awful to look at. His eyes dwindled to a pair of green sparks. I invite them to come and have a little chat with me, he said in a soft voice. A knock on the door interrupted him, and his face resumed its amiable expression. Who is it? Who is it? He inquired. Mr. Stilett, was the answer. Come tomorrow, replied Mr. Wilde. Impossible, began the other, but was silenced by a soft bark from Mr. Wilde. Come tomorrow, he repeated. We heard somebody move away from the door and turn to the corner by the stairway. Who is that? I asked. Arnold Stilett, owner and editor-in-chief of the great New York Daily. He drummed on the ledger of his fingerless hand, adding, I pay him very badly, but he thinks it's a good bargain. Arnold Stilett, I repeated, amazed. Yes, said Mr. Wilde with a self-satisfied cough. The cat, which had entered the room as he spoke, hesitated, looked up at him, and snarled. He climbed down from the chair and squatted on the floor, took the creature into his arms, and caressed her. The cat ceased snarling and presently began a loud purring, which seemed to increase in timbre as he stroked her. "Where are the notes?" I asked. He pointed to the table, and for the 100th time I picked up the bundle of manuscript entitled, "The Imperial Dynasty of America." No, 5 days easily, 5K. Oh yeah, that's fair. That is very true. I'm so sorry that you can hear a motorcycle outside. I live right by one that every afternoon and every night vrum vrums. I don't know why. 1913 is the furthest back I can find, and there 500 becomes 16,000 in modern dollars. Yeah, there's no way this isn't satire. Oh no, so that's the thing. As soon as they brought up like the lethal chamber, I was like, okay, this is satire. This is a condemnation of the state of the world that the author saw themselves in. And the fact that it still holds true today in some cases is kind of messed up. One by one, I studied the well-worn pages, worn only by my own handling, and although I knew all by heart from the beginning, when from Carcosa, the Hyads, Hastur, and Aldebaran, to Castigain, Louis de Wait. Hastur. I believe it's Hastur the King in yellow. You're not supposed to call him his name, but Hastur is his name. And then Castigain, Louis is the cousin, and Castigain is what the main character was called. One by one, I studied the well-worn pages, worn only by my own handling, and although I knew all by heart from the beginning, when from Carcosa, the Hyads, Hastur, and Aldebaran, to Castigain, Louis de Calvados, born December 19th, 1877, I read it with an eager, rapt attention, pausing to repeat parts of it aloud, and dwelling especially on Hildred de Calvados, only son of Hildred Castigain and Edith Landis Castigain, first in succession, etc., etc. Interesting. If you say his name, you draw his attention. Yeah, maybe I want to get his attention. Maybe I want to have a word with him. When I finished speaking, Mr. Wilde nodded and coughed. "Speak of your legitimate ambition," he said. "How do Constance and Louis get along?" "She loves him," I replied simply. The cat on his knee suddenly turned and struck at his eyes, and he flung her off and climbed on the chair opposite me. "And Dr. Archer, but that's a matter you can settle any time you wish," he added. "Yes," I replied. "Dr. Archer can wait, but it is time I saw my cousin Louis." "It is time," he repeated. Then he took another ledger from the table and ran over the leaves rapidly. "We are now in communication with 10,000 men," he muttered. We can count on 100,000 within the first 28 hours, and in 48 hours the state will rise en masse. The country follows the state, and the portion that will not, California and the Northwest, might better never have been inhabited. I shall not send them to the yellow sign. The blood rushed to my head, but I only answered, "A new broom sweeps clean." The ambition of Caesar and of Napoleon pales before that which could not rest until it had seized the minds of men and controlled even their unborn thoughts, said Mr. Wilde. "You're speaking of the king in yellow," I groaned with a shudder. "He is a king whom emperors have served." "I am content to serve him," I replied. Mr. Wilde sat rubbing his ears with his crippled hand. "Perhaps Constance does not love him," he suggested. I started to reply, but a sudden burst of military music from the street below drowned my voice. The 20th Dragoon Regiment, formerly in garrison at Mount St. Vincent, was returning from the maneuvers in Westchester County to its new barracks on East Washington Square. It was my cousin's regiment. They were a fine lot of fellows, in their pale blue, tight-fitting jackets, jaunty busbies, and white riding breeches with the double yellow stripe, into which their limbs seemed molded. Every other squadron was armed with lances, from the metal points of which fluttered yellow and white pennons. The band passed, playing their regimental march. Then came the colonel and staff, the horses crowding and trampling, while their heads bobbed in unison. The pennons fluttered from their lance points. The troopers, who rode with the beautiful English seat, looked brown as berries from their bloodless campaign among the farms of Westchester, and the music of their sabers against the stirrups, and the jingle of spurs and of carbines was delightful to me. I saw Louis riding with his squadron. He was as handsome an officer as I had ever seen. Mr. Wilde, who had mounted a chair by the window, saw him too, but said nothing. Louis turned and looked straight at Hawberk's shop as he passed, and I could see the flush on his brown cheeks. I think Constance must have been at the window. When the last troopers had clattered by, and the last pennons vanished into South Fifth Avenue, Mr. Wilde clambered out of his chair and dragged the chest away from the door. Dread Persephone, my goth Bessie. I think you might be autistic. Okay, so what I've picked up on is in Lovecraft, you almost always follow a well-to-do New Englander who is removed from the goings-on of the dirty, scary, poor people, right? That's a hallmark of Lovecraft. That's actually that's part of why I think he's legitimately just not a very good writer. I think that the setting, the Lovecraftian mythos is all very interesting, but I think that his actual physical writing is not very good. This has us follow not just someone who has read The King in Yellow, someone who I believe, and don't correct me if I'm wrong, I want to figure this out on my own, but I like talking about it. We are following an adherent of The King in Yellow. The repairer of reputations, Mr. Wilde, is effectively like a cultist, and Mr. Castigane, the narrator, is working alongside him. And both, like, you're speaking of the King in Yellow, he's a king whom emperors have served. I'm content to serve him. So, interesting. I wasn't... I was expecting more of a kind of 3 steps removed, like with Lovecraft, but no. Interesting. I dig this. Yes, he said. It is time you saw your cousin Louis. He unlocked the door and I picked up my hat and stick and stepped into the corridor. The stairs were dark. Groping about, I set my foot on something soft, which snarled and spit, and I aimed a murderous blow at the cat. But my cane shivered to splinters against the balustrade, and the beast scurried back into Mr. Wilde's room. Passing Hawberk's door again, I saw him still at work on the armor, but I did not stop, and stepping out into Bleecker Street, I followed it to Worcester, skirted the grounds of the lethal chamber, and crossing Washington Park, went straight to my rooms in the Benedict. Here I lunched comfortably, reading the Herald and the Meteor, and finally went to the steel safe in my bedroom and set the time combination. The 3 3/4 minutes which it is necessary to wait while the time lock is opening are, to me, golden moments. From the instant I set the combination to the moment where I grasp the knob and swing back the solid steel door, I live in an ecstasy of expectation. Those moments must be like moments passed in paradise. I know that I am fine. I know that I am to find at the end of the time limit. I know what I am to find at the end of the time limit. I know what the massive safe holds secure for me alone, and the exquisite pleasure of waiting is hardly enhanced when the safe opens and I lift from its velvet crown a diadem of purest gold blazing with diamonds. I do this every day, and yet the joy of awaiting and at last touching again the diadem only seems to increase as the days pass. Is a diadem fit for a king among kings, an emperor among emperors? The King in Yellow might scorn it, but it shall be worn by his royal servant. Oh, Hog. Nice. I held it in my arms until the alarm on the safe rang harshly, and then tenderly, proudly, I replaced it and shut the steel doors. I walked slowly back into my study, which faces Washington Square, and leaned on the windowsill. The afternoon sun poured into my windows, and a gentle breeze stirred the branches of the elms and maples in the park, now covered with buds and tender foliage. A flock of pigeons circled about the tower of the memorial church, sometimes alighting on the purple tiled roof, sometimes wheeling down to the Lotos fountain? To the Lotos fountain in front of the marble archway. The gardeners were busy with the flower beds around the fountain, and the freshly turned earth smelled sweet and spicy. A lawnmower drawn by a fat white horse. Why's it gotta be fat? Is it gonna be a mercy to put a bullet through its head too? Because it's... Come on. A lawnmower drawn... I just realized. A lawnmower drawn by a horse. They mowed lawns with horses. Huh. I suppose that makes sense. Because in the same way that, like, plowing used to be done with cattle, with oxen, or sometimes horses, mostly oxen, I believe. Huh. I hadn't considered that in city living, you'd have lawns mowed before motorized mowers. Yeah, like a push wheel mower but pulled. Yeah. Huh. I hadn't considered that. You would serve Haster sounds like a prayer or hymn from church. I mean, that's basically what it is. Clinked across the green sward and watering carts poured showers of spray over the asphalt drives. Huh! I hadn't considered the landscaping of 19th century New York City. But yeah, 100%, it would involve horses. Because horses, up until the advent of the automobile and the rapid expansion of it, were everywhere. And they were involved in everything. And there were entire industries devoted entirely to horse care. Neat. You learn something new every day, just like how to solve bigotry. Around the statue of Peter Stuyvesant, which in 1897 had replaced the monstrosity supposed to represent Garibaldi, children played in the spring sunshine, and nurse girls wheeled elaborate baby carriages with a reckless disregard for the pasty-faced occupants, which could probably be explained by the presence of a half dozen trim dragoon troopers languidly lolling on the benches. Through the trees, the Washington Memorial Arch glistened like silver in the sunshine, and beyond, on the eastern extremity of the square, the gray stone barracks of the dragoons and the white granite artillery stables were alive with color and motion. I looked at the lethal chamber on the corner of the square opposite. A few curious people still lingered about that gilded iron railing, but inside the grounds the paths were deserted. I watched the fountain ripple and sparkle. The sparrows had already found this new bathing nook, and the basins were crowded with the dusty feathered little things. 2 or 3 white peacocks picked their way across the lawns, and a drab-colored pigeon sat so motionless on the arm of one of the fates that it seemed to be a part of the sculpted stone. I feel like this story is going to end, the Repair of Reputation is going to end, with Mr. Constagane going to the lethal chamber. Right? Because at first I thought it was just to kind of be world building. But now it keeps coming up, so I assume it's going to be a classic, like, Lovecraftian style, because again, this isn't written by Lovecraft, it's written by Chambers. I feel like it's going to be a Lovecraft style of like, oh no, the horrors which are too bad, which are too horrifying for me to live with, I need to end my own life in order to escape them, or in honor of the King in Yellow to reach Carcosa, whatever, and then they're going to go to the lethal chamber. Because this is like the 3rd time the lethal chamber has been brought up, so I think that it's going to be a recurring theme. And we're like halfway through the short story at this point. Stuyvesant? Peter Stuyvesant was the last governor of New Amsterdam when the English came and took it over and made it New York. Ah, thank you. Arrow's expression jumping from focusing to smiley. Okay, I'm trying my best. Don't make fun of me. As I was turning carelessly away, a slight commotion. As I was turning carelessly away, a slight commotion in the group of curious loiterers around the gates attracted my attention. A young man had entered and was advancing with nervous strides along the gravel path which leads to the bronze doors of the lethal chamber. He paused a moment before the fates, and as he raised his head to those 3 mysterious faces, the pigeon rose from its sculpted perch, circled about for a moment, and wheeled to the east. The young man pressed his hands into his face, and then, with an undefinable gesture, sprang up the marble steps. The bronze doors closed behind him, and half an hour later, the loiterers slouched away, and the frightened pigeon returned to its perch in the arms of fate. I put on my hat and went out into the park for a little walk before dinner. As I crossed the central driveway, a group of officers passed, and one of them called out, "Hello, Hildred," and came back to shake hands with me. It was my cousin Louis, who stood smiling and tapping his spurred heels with his riding whip. Just back from I don't know why I keep wanting to call it Winchester. Just back from Westchester, he said. Been doing the bucolic? Been doing the bucolic, milking herds, dairy maids in sunbonnets who say how and I don't think when you tell them they're pretty. What? How? Who say how and I don't think when you tell them they're pretty? I'm nearly dead for square meals at Delmonico's. What's the news? There is none, I replied presently. I saw your regiment coming in this morning. Did you? I didn't see you. Where were you? In Mr. Wilde's window. Oh, hell, he began impatiently. That man is stark mad. I don't understand why you... He saw how annoyed I felt by this outburst and begged my pardon. Really, old chap, he said. I don't mean to run you down. I don't mean to run down a man you like, but... Sorry. I don't mean to run down a man you like? Is the Yowie real? Did I really manifest? Am I 2 for 2? Really, old chap, he said. I don't mean to run down a man you like, but for the life of me, I can't see what the deuce you find in common with Mr. Wilde. He's not well bred, to put it generously. He's hideously deformed. His head is the head of a criminally insane person. You know yourself he's been in an asylum, so have I interrupted calmly. Louis looked startled and confused for a moment, but recovered and slapped me heartily on the shoulder. You were completely cured, he began, but I stopped him again. I suppose you mean that I was simply acknowledged to have never been insane. Of course, that's what I meant, he said. He laughed. I disliked his laugh because I knew it was forced, but I nodded gaily. I nodded gaily and asked where he was going. Louis looked after his brother officers who had almost reached Broadway. We had intended to sample a Brunswick cocktail, but to tell you the truth, I was anxious for an excuse to go and see Hallberg and said, Come along, I'll make you my excuse. We found old Hallberg, nearly attired in a fresh spring suit, standing at the door of his shop and sniffing the air. I had just decided to take Constance for a little stroll before dinner, he replied to the impetuous volley of questions from Louis. We thought of walking on the Peak Terrace along the North River. At that moment, Constance appeared and grew pale and rosy by turns as Louis bent over her small gloved fingers. I tried to excuse myself, alleging an engagement uptown, but Louis and Constance would not listen, and I saw I was expected to remain and engage old Hallberg's attention. After all, it would be just as well if I kept my eye on Louis, I thought, and when they hailed a Spring Street horse car, I got in after them and took my seat beside the armorer. The beautiful line of parks and granite terraces overlooking the wharves along the North River, which were built in 1910 and finished in the autumn of 1917, had become one of the most popular promenades in the metropolis. They extended from the Battery to 190th Street, overlooking the noble river and affording a fine view of the Jersey Shore and the Highlands opposite. Cafes and restaurants were scattered here and there among the trees, and twice a week, military bands from the garrison played in the kiosks of the parapets. We sat down in the sunshine on the beaches at the foot of the equestrian strait of General Sheridan. Constance tipped her sunshade to shield her eyes, and she and Louis began a murmuring conversation which was impossible to catch. Old Hallberg, leaning on his ivory-headed cane, lighted an excellent cigar, the mate to which I politely refused, and smiled at vacancy. The sun hung low above the Staten Island woods, and the bay was dyed with golden hues reflected from the sun-warmed sails of the shipping in the harbor. Brigs, schooners, yachts, clumsy ferry boats, their decks swarming with people, railroad transports carrying lines of brown, blue, and white freight cars, stately sounded steamers, de classe tramp steamers, coasters, dredgers, scows, and everywhere pervading the entire bay, impudent little tugs puffing and whistling officiously. These were the crafts. I need a better accent. I don't pronounce T's at the end of words I found. These were the crafts. Like, I don't say crafts. I say crafts. So I just, like, if a T is in the middle of a word, if it's not at the front or the end, I will not say it. And that makes it so difficult to enunciate. These were the crafts which churned the sunlit waters as far as the eye could reach, in calm contrast, because like Contrast. I don't know. I'm secretly French, but only for teas. In calm contrast to the hurry of sailing vessels and steamer, now I'm self-conscious about it. In calm contrast to the hurry of sailing vessels and steamer, a silent fleet of white warships lay motionless in midstream. Okay. This is just an interesting sentence to say. In calm contrast to the hurry of sailing vessel, a steamer, a silent fleet of white warships lay motionless in midstream. Like, Chambers, you knew what you were doing. I see that consonance and that assonance and that alliteration. BU, enunciating's for old people and annoying people. I'm reading an old work. I should be old to read this work. Constance's merry laugh aroused me from my reverie. What are you staring at? She inquired. Nothing, the fleet. I smiled. Then Louis told us what the vessels were, pointing out each by its relative position to the old red fort on Governor's Island. That little cigar shop thing is a torpedo boat, he explained. There are 4 more lying close together. They are the Tarpon, the Falcon, the Sea Fox, and the Octopus. The gunboats just above are the Princeton, the Chaplain, the Stillwater, and the Erie. Next to them lie the cruisers Farragut and Los Angeles, and above them the battleships California and Dakota, and the Washington, which is the flagship. Those 2 squatty-looking chunks of metal which are anchored there off Castle William are the double-turreted monitors, terrible and magnificent. Behind them lies the ram Osceola. Osceola. Constance looked at him with deep approval in her beautiful eyes. What loads of things you know for a soldier, she said, and we all joined in the laugh which followed. Presently, Louis rose with a nod to us and offered his arm to Constance, and they strolled away from the river wall. Hawberk watched them for a moment and then turned to me. Mr. Wilde was right, he said. I found the missing tassets and left Cassiard of the Princes Emblazoned in a vile old junk garret in Pell Street. 998? I inquired with a smile. Yes. Mr. Wilde is a very intelligent man, I observed. I want to give him the credit of this most important discovery, continued Hawberk, and I intend it shall be known that he is entitled to the fame of it. He won't thank you for that, I answered sharply. Please, say nothing about it. Do you know what it is worth? Said Hawberk. No, $50 perhaps, which, as we established, is like thousands of dollars in the modern day. It is valued at $500, but the owner of the Prince's Emblazoned will give $2,000 to the person who completes his suit. That reward also belongs to Mr. Wilde. He doesn't want it. He refuses it. I answered angrily. What do you know about Mr. Wilde? He doesn't need the money. He is rich, or will be, richer than any living man except myself. What we will care for money. What will we care for money then? What will we care, he and I, when what? Demanded Hawberk, astonished. You'll see, I replied, on my guard again. Okay, so you really are just like a cultist. You are the villain, Mr. Castigane, because you don't know how to shut up about your evil plans to overtake the entire country, right? Double-turreted monitors. What a vile concept. Yeah. Almost as vile as Mr. Castigane's inability to keep his evil plans to himself. Like, geez. He looked at me narrowly, just as Dr. Archer used to, and I knew he thought I was mentally unsound. Perhaps it was fortunate for him that he did not use the word lunatic just then. No, I replied to his unspoken thought. I am not mentally weak. My mind is as healthy as Mr. Wilde's. Again, comparing himself to Mr. Wilde. I do not care to explain just yet of what I have on hand, but it is an investment which will pay more than mere gold, silver, and precious stones. It will secure the happiness and prosperity of a continent, yes, a hemisphere. Oh, said Hawberk. And eventually, I continued more quietly, it will secure the happiness of the entire world. And incidentally, your own happiness and prosperity as well as Mr. Wilde's? Exactly, I smiled. But I could have throttled him for taking that tone. He looked at me in silence for a while and then said, very gently, Why don't you give up your books and studies, Mr. Castigane, and take a tramp along the mountains somewhere or other? You used to be fond of fishing. Take a cast or two at the trout in the Wranglies. I don't care for fishing anymore, I answered, without a shade of annoyance in my voice. You used to be fond of everything, he continued. Athletics, yachting, shooting, riding. I have never cared to ride since my fall, I said quietly. Ah, yes, your fall, he repeated, looking away from me. I thought this nonsense had gone far enough, so I turned the conversation back to Mr. Wilde, but he was scanning my face again in a manner highly offensive to me. Mr. Wilde, he repeated, do you know what he did this afternoon? He came downstairs and nailed a sign over the hall on the hall door next to mine. It read, Mr. Wilde, repairer of reputations, third bell. Do you know what a repairer of reputations can be? I do, I replied, suppressing the rage within. Oh, he said again. Louis and Constance came strolling back and stopped to ask if we would join them. Hawberk looked at his watch. At the same moment, a puff of smoke shot from the casemates of Castle William, and the boom of the sunset gun rolled along the water and was re-echoed from the highlands opposite. The flag came running down from the flagpole, the bugle sounded on the white decks of the warships, and the first electric light sparkled out from the Jersey shore. As I turned into the city with Hawberk, I heard Constance murmur something to Louis, which I did not understand, but Louis whispered, my darling, in reply, and again, walking ahead with Hawberk through the square, I heard a murmur of, sweetheart, and my own Constance. And I knew the time had nearly arrived when I should speak of important matters with my cousin Louis. Okay, Mr. Castigain and Mr. Wilde are evil. They're trying to start a cult. They think they're gonna bring the King in Yellow forth into the world, probably bring Carcosa into the real world or something, and take over all of the US. Mr. Wilde claims to have connections in most of the organizations and people in the world in the US. He said he has, I think it's 1,000 under his employ, and he would have 100,000 within 28 hours, assuming he activated it. So I don't know if Constance, Mr. Castigain said he had no interest in Hawberk or Constance. So I think it might be they want Constance to be the bride of the King in Yellow or something, because in the King in Yellow, let's see if I can find it. In the King in Yellow, in the actual story, there was a Louis, Hildred the Calvados, only son of Hildred Castigain. No? So... So Hildred is the name of the main character. We are following Hildred de Calvados. But he's called Mr. Castigain because his parents are Castigain. So Castigain... So Louis de Calvados is also Louis Castigain because Louis is the cousin of Hildred de Calvados, who is also Hildred Castigain, son of Hildred and Edith. I am suspicious. I don't know what they want with Constance, but apparently Constance is integral to their planning. Yeah, he really is a cultist. I don't know where. So also, he has a crown. He has a diadem, which is basically a crown. And he says that his most loyal servant would wear it. I think what this is that he thinks he is going to be in charge under the King in Yellow. And he seems to be working alongside, but being played by Mr. Wilde, is my guess. I think Mr. Wilde sees Hildred as an asset. Sees Hildred as one of his many people that he can manipulate. But Hildred sees this as he's playing Mr. Wilde and will be the favorite servant? ? Or maybe he's loyal to Mr. Wilde and knows Wilde is loyal to the King in Yellow. I feel like this is not going to work out well for Hildred. So definitely not mentally sound. But oh heck, I just realized I never added anyone on the server when I went live. Whoops. Awkward. Yeah, Wilde has all the things wrapped up. Well, no, he doesn't have any fingers to wrap them up in. He has them wrapped up in his cat. So, interesting note. In Lovecraft's work, cats almost always have a special significance. And cats occupy the city of Relay, I believe, and are favored by the great race of Yith, I think. So the fact that a cat doesn't like Mr. Wilde implies Mr. Wilde does actually literally have some connection to the Eldritch, because cats in Lovecraftian mythos, even though this is by Chambers, not by Lovecraft, had some kind of connection to the otherworldly. Pretty cocky for cultists, yeah. It's been 2 hours. Do I at Discord and be like, hey, member stream started 2 hours ago, whoops. They'll be fine. They'll be fine. Whew. Okay. 2/3 done. One morning, actually, let me drink some water first. I sippy my water. One morning, early in May, I stood before the steel safe in my bedroom, trying on the golden jeweled crown. The diamonds flashed fire as I turned to the mirror, and the heavy beaten gold burned like a halo around my head. I remembered Camilla's agonized scream and the awful words echoing through the dim streets of Carcosa. They were the last lines in the first act, and I dared not think of what followed. Dared not. Even in the spring sunshine, there in my own room, surrounded with familiar objects, reassured by the bustle from the streets and voices of the servants in the hallway outside. For those poisoned words had dropped slowly into my heart, as death sweat drops upon a bedsheet and is absorbed. Trembling, I put the diadem from my head and wiped my forehead, but I thought of Hastur and of my own rightful ambition, and I remembered Mr. Wilde as I had last left him, his face all torn and bloody from the claws of that devil's creature, and what he said. What he said! The alarm bell in the safe began to whir harshly, and I knew my time was up, but I would not heed it, and replaced the flashing circlet upon my head. I turned defiantly to the mirror. I stood for a long time absorbed in the changing expression of my own eyes. The mirror reflected a face which was like my own, but whiter, and so thin that I hardly recognized it. And all the time I kept repeating between my clenched teeth, "The day is come, the day is come." While the alarm in the safe whirred and clamored, and the diamond sparkled and flamed above my brow, I heard a door open, but did not heed it. It was only when I saw two faces in the mirror. It was only when another face rose over my shoulder, and two other eyes met mine. I wheeled like a flash and seized a long knife from my dresser table, and my cousin sprang back very pale, crying, "Hildred, for God's sake!" And then my hand fell. He said, "It is I, Louis. Don't you know me?" I stood silent. I could not have spoken for my life. He walked up to me and took the knife from my hand. "What is all this?" he inquired in a gentle voice. "Are you ill?" "No," I replied, but I doubt if he heard me. Come, old fellow," he cried. "Take off that brass crown and toddle into the study. Are you going into a masquerade? What's all this theatrical tinsel anyway?" "Oh. It's a brass crown." So he is just disconnected from reality. So not only is he referencing Carcosa, which is the story, is the city within the story, he goes crazy. Got it. I was glad he thought the crown was made of brass and paste, yet I didn't like him any the better for thinking so. I let him take it from my hand, knowing it was best to humor him. He tossed the splendid diadem in the air, catching it, and turned to me smiling. "It's a dear at 50 cents. What's it for?" I did not answer, but took the circlet from his hands and, placing it in the safe, shut the massive steel door. The alarm ceased its infernal din at once. He watched me curiously, but did not seem to notice the sudden ceasing of the alarm. He did, however, speak of the safe as a biscuit box. Oh, understood. Fearing lest he might examine the combination, I led the way into my study. Louis threw himself on the sofa and flicked at flies with his eternal riding whip. He wore his fatigue uniform with the braided jacket and jaunty cap, and I noticed that his riding boots were all splashed with red mud. So I didn't know if he legitimately had a super expensive crown in a super hyper advanced safe. I thought it was weird, but I didn't think it was literally like just a thing of brass and tinsel in a biscuit box. Interesting. Where have you been? I inquired. Jumping mud creeks in Jersey, he said. I haven't had time to change yet. I was rather in a hurry to see you. Haven't you got a glass of something? I'm dead tired. Been in the saddle 24 hours. I gave him some brandy from my medicinal store, where he drank with a grimace. Damn bad stuff, he observed. I'll give you an address where they sell brandy that is brandy. It's good enough for my needs, I said indifferently. I use it to rub my chest with. He stared and flicked at a fly. See here, old fellow, he began. I've got something to suggest to you. It's 4 years now that you've shut yourself up in here like an owl, never going anywhere, never taking any healthy exercise, never doing a damn thing but poring over those books up there on the mantelpiece. He glanced along the row of shelves. Napoleon, 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 he read. For heaven's sake, have you nothing but Napoleons there? I wish they were bound in gold, I said. But wait, yes, there is another book. The King in Yellow. I looked him steadily in the eye. Have you never read it? I asked. I? No, thank God, I don't want to be driven crazy. I saw he regretted his speech as soon as he had uttered it. There is only one word which I loathe more than I do lunatic. And that word is crazy. But I controlled myself and asked him why he thought The King in Yellow dangerous. Oh, I don't know, he said hastily. I only remember the excitement it created and the denunciations from pulpit and press. I believe the author shot himself after bringing forth this monstrosity, didn't he? I understand he is still alive, I answered. That's probably true, he muttered. Bullets couldn't kill a fiend like that. It is a book of great truths, I said. Yes, he replied, of truths which send men frantic and blast their lives. I don't care if the thing is, as they say, the very supreme essence of art. It's a crime to have written, and I, for one, shall never open its pages. Is that what you have come to tell me? I asked. No, he said. I came to tell you I'm going to be married. I believe for a moment my heart ceased to beat, but I kept my eyes on his face. Yes, he continued, smiling happily. Married to the sweetest girl on earth. Constance Hawberk, I said mechanically. How did you know? He cried, astonished. I didn't know it myself until the evening last April, when we strolled down the embankment before dinner. When is it to be? I asked. It was to have... Oh my God, wait, so... I forgot this is the 19th century. So, Louis has a girl he's sweet on, and he's like, hey, want to get married? And they're like, sure. So they're going to get married within like 6 months of... They haven't even been in a relationship. They haven't even gone through like a courting period, as far as I'm aware. It's literally just been Constance had eyes for him, and he was off flirting with dairy maids who go, how? And I don't think when they're called pretty. Jeebus crisp. This is a very different time. It was to be next September. Oh, and next September. Okay. So a year and a half. But now, an hour ago, a dispatch came ordering our regiment to Presidio San Francisco. We leave at noon tomorrow. Tomorrow, he repeated. Just think, Hildred. Tomorrow I should be the happiest fellow that ever drew breath in this jolly world, for Constance will go with me. Oh. That's cute. I offered him my hand in congratulation, and he seized it and shook it for the good-natured fool he was. Or pretended to be. I'm going to get my squadron as a wedding present, he rattled on. Captain and Mrs. Louis Castigain, Hildred? Then he told me where it would be and who was to be there, and made me promise to come and be best man. I set my teeth and listened to his boyish chatter without showing what I felt, but I was getting to the limit of my endurance, and when he jumped up and switched his spurs till they jangled, said he must go, I did not detain him. There's one thing I want to ask of you, I said quietly. Out with it, it's promised, he laughed. I want you to meet for a quarter... I want you to meet me for a quarter of an hour talks tonight. Of course, if you wish, he said, somewhat puzzled. Where? Anywhere, in the park there. What time, Hildred? Midnight. What in the name of... he began, but checked himself and laughed assented. I watched him go down the stairs and hurry away, his saber banging with every stride. He turned into Bleecker Street, and I knew he was going to see Constance. I gave him 10 minutes to disappear, and then followed in his footsteps, taking with me the jeweled crown and the silken robe embroidered with a yellow sign. When I turned into Bleecker Street and entered the doorway which bore the sign, Mr. Wilde, Repairer of Reputations, third bell. 19th century was low-key the height of hookup culture. Okay, it was the height of hookup culture in the sense that you would get married to someone and then you would like go from not knowing someone to being like having a wedding ceremony 6 months later, if that. Sometimes it was like a month. And then once you got married, you would have a whole lot of hanky-panky with them because now you're actually allowed to. And then you would realize after a year or two that you're really not compatible, and that given that the woman is considered the property of the husband, the husband really probably won't treat her well. So then there's going to be a lot of interpersonal drama, but then you have kids involved, then you have different families that are putting pressure on you. So then you're going to have a mental break between one of the betrothed and one of the spouses, and then the man is going to go off and start a second family. Because that's just how you did things back then. Men would have like 2-3 families that they would just rotate between. And then the woman would just, I don't know, be sad. And that was the height of hookup culture in the 19th century. I saw old Hodberg moving around in his shop, and I imagined I heard Constance's voice in the parlor, but I avoided them both and hurried up to the trembling stairways to Mr. Wilde's apartment. I knocked and entered without ceremony. Mr. Wilde lay groaning on the floor, his face covered with blood, his clothes torn to shreds. Drops of blood were scattered all about over the carpet, which had been ripped and frayed in the evidently recent struggle. "It's that cursed cat," he said, ceasing his groans, and turned his colorless eyes to me. "She attacked me while I was asleep. I believe she will kill me yet." This was too much, so I went into the kitchen and, seizing a hatchet from the pantry, started to find the infernal beast, and settle her there and then. My search was fruitless, and after a while I gave it up and came back to find Mr. Wilde squatting on his high chair by the table. He had washed his face and changed his clothes. The great furrows which the cat's claws had plowed up from his face had filled with collodion, and a rag hid the wound on his throat. I told him I should kill the cat when I came across her, but he only shook his head and turned to the open ledger before him. He read name after name of the people who had come to him to regard their reputation, and the sums he had amassed were startling. "I put the screws now and then," he explained. "One day or another, some of these people will assassinate you," I insisted. "Do you think so?" he said, rubbing his mutilated ears. It was useless to argue with him, so I took down the manuscript entitled Imperial Dynasty of America. For the last time I should ever take it down to Mr. Wilde's study. I read it through, thrilling and trembling with pleasure. When I finished, Mr. Wilde took the manuscript and, turning to the dark passages which led from his study to his bedchamber, called out in a loud voice, "Vance." Then, for the first time, I noticed a man crouching there in the shadow. How I had overlooked him during my search for the cat, I cannot imagine. "Vance! Come in," cried Mr. Wilde. The figure rose and crept towards us, and I shall never forget the face that he raised to mine, as the light from the window illuminated it. "Vance, this is Mr. Castigane," said Mr. Wilde. Before he had finished speaking, the man threw himself on the ground before the table, crying and gasping, "Oh God! Oh my God! Help me! Forgive me! Oh, Mr. Castigane! Keep that man away! You cannot mean it! You're different! Save me! I am broken down! I was in a madhouse, and now, when all was coming right, when I had forgotten the king in yellow, but I shall go mad again! I shall go mad!" His voice died in a choking rattle, for Mr. Wilde had leapt on him, and his right hand encircled the man's throat. When Vance fell into a heap on the floor, Mr. Wilde clambered nimbly into his chair again, and rubbed his mangled ear with the stump of his hand, turned to me and asked me for the ledger. I reached it down from the shelf, and he opened it, and after a moment's searching among the beautifully written pages, he coughed complacently and pointed to the name Vance. "Vance," he read aloud. "Osgood Oswald Vance." At the sound of his name, the man on the floor raised his head and turned a convulsed face to Mr. Wilde. His eyes were injected with blood, his lips tumefied. "Called April 28th, continued Mr. Wilde. "Occupation, cashier in the Seaforth National Bank. Has served a firm term of forgery at Sing Sing, from whence he transferred to the Asylum for the Criminal Insane. Pardoned by the Governor of New York, and discharged from the asylum January 19, 1918. Reputation damaged at Sheepshead Bay. Rumors that he lives beyond his income. Reputation to be repaired at once. Retainer, $1,500. Note, has embezzled sums amounting to $30,000. Holy heck! $30,000 since March 20th, 1919. Excellent family. and secured present position through uncle's influence. Father, president of Seaforth Bank. I looked at the man on the floor. Get up, Vance, said Mr. Wilde in a gentle voice. Vance rose as if hypnotized. You will do as we suggest now, observed Mr. Wilde, and opening the manuscript, he read the entire history of the Imperial Dynasty of America. Then, in a kind and soothing murmur, he ran over the important points with Vance, who stood like one stunned. His eyes were so blank and vacant that I imagined he had become half-witted, and remarked it to Mr. Wilde, who replied that it was of no consequence anyway. Very patiently, we pointed out to Vance what his share in the affair would be, and he seemed to understand after a while. Mr. Wilde explained the manuscript using several volumes of heraldry to substantiate the result of his researches. He mentioned the establishment of the dynasty in Carcosa, the lakes which connected Hastur, Aldebaran, and the mystery of the Hyades. He spoke of Casilda and Camilla, and sounded the cloudy depths of Dem and the lake of Hali. The scalloped tatters of the king in yellow must hide Ythil forever, he muttered, but I do not believe Vance heard him. Then, by degrees, he led Vance along the ramifications of the imperial family to Uat and Thale, from Nautalba and the Phantom of Truth to Aldonis, and then tossing aside his manuscript and notes, he began the wonderful story of the last king. Fascinated and thrilled, I watched him. He threw up his head, his long arms were stretched out in a magnificent gesture of pride and power, and his eyes blazed deep in their sockets like two emeralds. Vance listened, stupefied. As for me, when at last Mr. Wilde had finished, and pointed to me, cried, "The cousin of the king!" My head swam with excitement. Oh! So Louis is the king in yellow. Or at least they assume him to be like the avatar of the king in yellow. Oh man. Where is this even gonna go? I have no clue. Controlling myself with a superhuman effort, I explained to Vance why I alone was worthy of the crown, and why my cousin must be exiled or die. I made him understand that my cousin must never marry, even after renouncing all of his claims, and how that least of all, he should marry the daughter of the Marquis of Avonshire and bring England into the question. I showed him a list of thousands of names, which Mr. Wilde had drawn up. Every man whose name was there had received the yellow sign, which no living human being dared disregard. The city, the state, the whole land were ready to rise and tremble before the pallid mask. The time had come. The people should know the son of Hastur, and the whole world bow to the black stars which hang in the sky over Carcosa. Vance leaned on the table, his head buried in his hands. Mr. Wilde drew a rough sketch for the margin of yesterday's Herald with a bit of lead pencil. It was a plan of Hallbrook's room. Then he wrote out the order and affixed the seal, and shaking like a palsied man, I signed my first writ of execution with my name, Hildred Rex. King Hildred. Mr. Wilde clambered to the floor and unlocked the cabinet, took a long square box from the first shelf. This he brought to the table and opened. A new knife lay in the tissue paper inside, and I picked it up and handed it to Vance, along with the order and the plan of Hallbrook's apartment. Then, Mr. Wilde told Vance he could go, and he went, shambling like an outcast of the slums. I sat for a while, watching the daylight fade behind the square tower of Judson Memorial Church, and finally, gathering up the manuscript and notes, took my hat and started for the door. Are they going to kill Louis? Are they getting Vance involved to kill Louis in like a ritual sacrifice so that Hildred can become the king in yellow? I mean, it could be another cousin. That's actually very true. Like, listen, man was ready to hatchet a cat. Nothing should surprise you. Mr. Wilde watched me in silence. When I had stepped into the hall, I looked back. Mr. Wilde's small eyes were still fixed on me. Behind him, the shadows gathered in the fading light. Then I closed the door behind me and went out into the darkening streets. I had eaten nothing since breakfast, but I was not hungry. A wretched, half-starved creature who stood looking across the street at the lethal chamber noticed me and came up to tell me a tale of misery. I gave him money, I don't know why, and he went away without thanking me. An hour later, another outcast approached and whined his story. I had a blank bit of paper in my pocket, on which was traced the yellow sign, and I handed it to him. He looked at it stupidly for a moment, and then, with an uncertain glance at me, folded it, in with what seemed to be an exaggerated care and placed it in his bosom. The electric lights were sparkling among the trees, and the new moon shone in the sky above the lethal chamber. It was tiresome waiting in the square. I wandered from the marble arch to the artillery stables and back again to the lotus fountain. The flowers and grass exhaled a fragrance which troubled me. Definitely autistic. This man is obsessed with specific types of stimulus, and he has mentioned multiple times very basic things being overwhelming to him. If you want autistic cultist representation who also is yaoi, I think, here you go. Hildred is your man. The jet of the fountain played in the moonlight, and the musical splash of falling drops reminded me of the tinkle of chained mail in Hallberg's shop. But it was not so fascinating, and the dull sparkle of moonlight on the water brought no such sensations of exquisite pleasure as when the sunshine played over the polished steel of a corselet on Hallberg's knee. I watched the bats darting and turning above the water plants in the fountain basin, but their rapid, jerky flight set my nerves on edge, and I went away to walk aimlessly to and fro among the trees. The artillery stables were dark, but in the cavalry barracks the officers' windows were brightly lighted, and the sally port was constantly filled with troopers in fatigue, carrying straw and harness with baskets filled with tin dishes. Twice, the mounted sentry at the gate was changed while I wandered up and down the asphalt walk. I looked at my watch. It was nearly time. The lights in the barracks went out, one by one. The barred gate was closed, and every minute or two, an officer passed in through the side wicket, leaving a rattle of accoutrement and a jingle of spurs on the night air. The square had become very silent. The last homeless loiterer had been driven away by the gray-coated park policeman. The car tracks along Worcester Street were deserted, and the only sound which broke the stillness was the stamping of the sentry's horse and the ring of his saber against the saddle pommel. In the barracks, the officers' quarters were still lighted, and military servants passed and repassed before the bay windows. 12 o'clock sounded from the new spire of St. Francis Xavier, and at the last stroke of the sad-toned bell, a figure passed through the wicket beside the portcullis, returned the salute of the sentry, and crossed the street, entering the square, and advanced towards the Benedict apartment in the house. "Louis!" I called. The man pivoted on his spurned heels and came straight towards me. "Is that you, Hildred?" "Yes, you're on time." I took his offered hand and we strolled towards the lethal chamber. He rattled on about his wedding and the graces of Constance and their future prospects, calling my attention to his captain's shoulder straps and the triple gold arabesque on his sleeve and fatigue cap. I believe I listened as much to the music of his spurs and saber as I did his boyish babble, and at last we stood under the elms of the 4th Street corner of the square opposite the lethal chamber. Then he laughed and asked me what I wanted with him. I motioned him to sit on a bench under the electric light and sat down beside him. He looked at me curiously with that same searching glance which I hate and fear so in doctors. I felt the insult of his look, but he did not know it, and I carefully concealed my feelings. "Well, old chap," he inquired, "what can I do for you?" I drew from my pocket the manuscript and notes of the Imperial Dynasty of America, and looked at him in the eye and said, "I will tell you, on your word as a soldier, promise me to read this manuscript from beginning to end without asking me a question. Promise me to read these notes in the same way, and promise me to listen what I have to tell later." "I promise if you wish it," he said pleasantly. "Give me the paper, Hildred." Every time I say manuscript, I'm assuming it means like a full novel. I'm assuming this is more like a pamphlet. I'm assuming this is more like a couple pages of a journal, because he asked for 15 minutes of time. And Hildred has read this hundreds of times. So I assume it's not like hundreds of pages long. It might be a couple pages long, which would make more sense. He began to read, raising his eyebrows with a puzzled, whimsical air, which made me tremble with suppressed anger. As he advanced, his eyebrows contracted, and his lips seemed to form the word rubbish. Then he looked slightly bored, but apparently for my sake, with an attempt at interest, which presently ceased to be an effort. He started when in the closely written pages he came to his own name. And when he came to mine, he lowered the paper and looked sharply at me for a moment. But he kept his word and resumed his reading, and I let the half-formed question die on his lips unanswered. When he came to the end and read the signature of Mr. Wilde, he folded the paper carefully and returned it to me. I handed him the notes, and he settled back, pushing his fatigue cap up to his forehead with a boyish gesture, which I remembered so well in school. I watched his face as he read, and when he finished, I took the notes with the manuscript and placed them in my pocket. Then I unfolded a scroll marked with the yellow sign. He saw the sign, but he did not seem to recognize it, and I called his attention to it somewhat sharply. "Well," he said, "I see it. What is it?" "It is the yellow sign," I said angrily. "Oh, that's it, is it?" said Louis in that flattening voice which Dr. Archer used to employ with me, and would probably have employed again had I not settled his affair for him. I kept my rage down and answered as steadily as possible. "Listen, you have engaged your word?" "I'm listening, old chap," he replied smoothly, soothingly. I began to speak very calmly. "Dr. Archer, having by some means become possessed by the secret of the imperial succession, attempted to deprive me of my right, alleging that because of a fall from my horse 4 years ago, I had become mentally deficient. He presumed to place me under restraint in his own house in hopes of either driving me insane or poisoning me. I've not forgotten it. I visited him last night, and the interview was final. It was an execution for Dr. Archer, not for Louis." Louis turned quite pale, but did not move. I resumed triumphantly. "There are yet 3 people to be interviewed in the interests of Mr. Wilde and myself. They are my cousin, Louis, Mr. Hawberk, and his daughter, Constance." Louis sprang to his feet, and I arose also, and flung the paper marked with the yellow sign to the ground. "Oh, I don't need to tell you what I have to say," I cried with a laugh of triumph. "You must renounce the crown to me, do you hear? To me!" Louis looked at me with a startled air, but recovered himself, said kindly, Of course I renounce the... What is it I must renounce?" "The crown," I said angrily. "Of course," he answered. "I renounce it. Come, old chap, I'll walk you back to your room with you." "Don't try any of your doctor tricks on me," I cried, trembling with fury. "Don't act as if you think I am insane." "What nonsense," he replied. "Come, it's getting late, Hildred." "No," I shouted. "You must listen. You cannot marry. I forbid it. You hear me? I forbid it. You shall renounce the crown, and in reward, I grant you exile. But if you refuse, you shall die." He tried to calm me, but I was roused at last, and drawing my long knife, barreled his way. Then I told him how they would find Dr. Archer in the cellar with his throat open, and I laughed in his face when I thought of Vance and his knife, and the order signed by me. "Ah, you are the king," I cried, "but I shall be king. Who are you to keep me from empire over all the habitable earth? I was born the cousin of a king, and I shall be the king." Louis stood white and rigid before me. Suddenly, a man came running up 4th Street, entered the gate of the Lethal Temple, traversed the path to the bronze doors at full speed, and plunged into the death chamber with the cry of one demented, and I laughed until I wept tears, for I had recognized Vance, and knew that Hawberk and his daughter were no longer in my way. "Go!" I cried to Louis. "You have ceased to be a menace. You will never marry Constance now, and if you marry anyone else in your exile, I will visit you as I did my doctor last night. Mr. Wilde takes charge of you tomorrow." Then I turned and darted into South 5th Avenue, and with a cry of terror, Louis dropped his belt and saber and followed me like the wind. I heard him close behind me at the corner of Bleecker Street, and I dashed into the doorway under Hawberk's sign. He cried, "Halt, or I fire!" But when he saw that I fled up the stairs, leaving Hawberk's shop below, he left me, and I heard him hammering and shouting at their door, as though it were possible to arouse the dead. Mr. Wilde's door was open, and I entered crying, "It is done! It is done! Let the nations rise and look upon their king!" But I could not find Mr. Wilde, so I went to the cabinet and took the splendid diadem from its case. Then I drew on the white silk robe, embroidered with the yellow sign, and placed the crown upon my head. At last I was king, king by my right in Hastur, king because I knew the mystery of the Hyades, and my mind had sounded the depths of the lake of Hali. I was king! The first gray pencilings of dawn would raise a tempest which would shake 2 hemispheres. Then, as I stood, my every nerve pitched to the highest tension, faint with the joy and splendor of my thought. Without, in the dark passage, a man groaned. I seized the tallow tip and sprang to the door. The cat passed me like a demon. The tallow dip went out, but my long knife flew swifter than she, and I heard her screech, and I knew that my knife had found her. For a moment, I listened to her tumbling and thumping in the darkness, and then, when her frenzy ceased, I lighted a lamp and raised it over my head. Mr. Wilde lay on the floor with his throat torn open. At first, I thought he was dead, but as I looked, a green sparkle came into his sunken eyes, his mutilated hand trembling, and then a spasm stretched from his mouth from ear to ear. For a moment, my terror and despair gave place to hope. But as I bent over him, eyeballs rolled clean around in his head, and he died. Then, while I stood, transfixed with rage and despair, seeing my crown, my empire, every hope and every ambition, my very life lying prostrate there with the dead master, they came, seized me from behind and bound me until my veins stood out like cords and my voice failed with paroxysms of my frenzied screams. But I still raged, bleeding and infuriated among them, and more than one policeman felt my sharp teeth. Then, when I could no longer move, they came nearer. I saw old Hallberg, and behind him my cousin Louis's ghastly face, and farther away in the corner a woman, Constance, weeping softly. "Ah, I see it now," I shrieked. "You have seized the throne and the empire. Woe! Woe to you who are crowned with the crown of the king in yellow." Editor's note. Mr. Cascane died yesterday in the asylum for the criminally insane. This is hard to listen to. Yeah. Whew. That was The Repairer of Reputations, the first story, The King in Yellow. I would say this is what I was looking for in terms of the pacing of The Monkey's Paw. If you saw or listened to me reading The Monkey's Paw last week, I brought up how it was a very plodding story, that the climax just kind of happened, right? I felt like it was just kind of dragging its feet going along, and then it stumbles through the climax, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. I could appreciate it for what it was, but I wasn't the biggest fan. This is one where there was a very steady increase in tension and information. We start off with like the world building of like setting up what is going on in the world right here, and kind of exploring the extremes of how the mundane world is, and contrasting that with the idealization of Carcosa. Even though we don't actually hear much about Carcosa, we only learn about it in snippets and like basically in this one poem at the very beginning, Act 1, Scene 2. I really like this. So I actually don't know if it was all a delusion or not. So I think what it was is that he gets arrested, and then he gets sent to the asylum for criminally insane and dies in there. I don't know if it's that he never left, or if he left actually and then did all of this and then got sent back and then died, right? So Mr. Wilde dies because of the cat. Cascane dies, presumably because he like took his own life or something, or just in the asylum. Vance threw himself in the lethal chamber, which I was correct that someone was going to jump into the lethal chamber, but it was not Cascane. I don't know if I would call this horror. I would call this more suspense, right? None of this was scary. This was more so thriller, right? So I'm a little bit excited to see where this goes from here, because that was a 50 pager. The Mask is like 30 pages. The Court of the Dragon is only like 15. Then the Yellow Sign is like another 30, 20, 15. Okay, so the Street of the First Shell and the Street of Our Lady of the Fields are both another like 50 pages. So we actually got one of the longest stories done first, which I'm very happy about, because I was worried I wouldn't be able to do... Like, I was worried 50 pages might take me like 4 hours, because I didn't know how fast I would read. I didn't know if I would get distracted. I didn't know if I was going to yap. But I think this is totally reasonable, where probably next stream, I can probably do both the Mask and the Court of the Dragon, because both of these are like 20 pages. So this would be like 50 pages total again. That'd be like another like 2 hours. Maybe we could do Demoiselle and Prophet's Paradise as well. We might be able to do Street of Four Winds and Street of First Shell. We might just only do like these three, and then this is, so if we do like 1 stream, 2 stream, 3 stream, 4 stream, 5 stream, 6 stream, so like 6 more streams. That's not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be like 10 more streams. So I had so much fun with this. Personally, I think he did do all this and then got sent back, but read the whole thing. Yeah. So I actually really enjoyed this. I wasn't sure how much I was going to enjoy it. Obviously, I was put off by the beginning. I was put off by how this begins because I wasn't sure if it was satire or not. It definitely has hallmarks of older writing. I'll say inexplicit dialogue, just like, who is this for? He explained that, blah, blah, blah. That is something that I don't see happen much in modern writing, at least not as much as it used to, which I don't think is a good or a bad thing. It's just, if I'm writing dialogue and I say, I introduced myself, he responded in kind. So, what's your favorite color? My favorite color is yellow. Well, why is that? He explained about the associations he has with the sun and sunflowers and gold, and how he is a happy person who looks on the bright side of life. And then also, my father gave me a yellow scarf back when I was just a boy. Like, that kind of mixing of on the page and off the page explicit dialogue is something I don't see a lot recently. Also, the adverbs, I pointed this out in Monkey's Paw. I feel like it's no longer in vogue to have I asked smiling, he replied coolly. I don't know. I continued a little impatiently is feels more modern, but honestly, much more fun than I expected. I was not expecting to have as good a time with this as I thought I would. Now, my question that I'm going to have to wait to figure out, because I don't know if I'm not going to do a member stream next week, because next week is Halloween. I'm just going to do a normal stream. I don't know if I'm going to yap. I don't know if I'm going to read. I'll probably figure it out in the time up. Like, I might just continue King in Yellow. I might just do a non-member stream reading King in Yellow, just to let folks who want to be involved do that. But I'm excited to see where this goes. Like, yeah, we get more information from the King in Yellow. This is much shorter. And this says it takes like an hour, so actually this might be like an hour. Huh, weird. Anyway, that was fun. You just got a bit recluse for Crinjo. Yeah. Personally, I think he did do all that. Yeah. Red stream, blue stream. I had a good time with this. I think I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to make the stream public. I'm going to at folks on the Discord about the short that came out, because I did have a short that came out like an hour ago. And I'm going to do stuff. I mean, I could read The Mask right now. If we want to just do another one, I could read The Mask, but I probably shouldn't. I should probably be productive. I have stuff I need to do. Okay, well, thank you all so much for swinging by. I appreciate you, whether you are watching this as a member in the live chat right now, or you are a lurker who is watching without speaking, or you were a VOD watcher and you're watching this independent of the member stream. Let me know what your thoughts on this were. Do you think this was real or not? I'm pretty confident this all did happen. I think this did happen. It's just Mr. Castigane's upset psyche that framed it in an odd manner. And I do like how that was handled. I do love that the riches that he has connection to are complete delusions. I do think it would be more interesting if the blending of Carcosa with reality and his lack of understanding of grounding was less, I guess I can say like 19th century. If him being unconnected to reality and seeing things not as they were was less, I don't know, like, I don't think it was handled poorly, but I do think he was kind of treated like a loony bin, right? If that makes sense, like the way that's just kind of handled. And I do like the fact that he doesn't like being called a lunatic. He doesn't like being called crazy. He feels as though he's perfectly sapient and sane. He compares himself to Mr. Wilde. Look at how sane Mr. Wilde is. I'm just as sane as he is. He's just as sane as I am. But I don't know. I'm of mixed thoughts when it comes to how it was, because, like, for instance, what was it? Not Mr. Vance. So it's before that. Like the safe being a biscuit box, the crown just being like 50 cents and just made of brass, is something where the reveal of that is interesting. Like, he did, however, speak of the safe as a biscuit box. I like that, to show the disconnect from reality, but I don't know if that's realistic. But to be fair, this is also like a cognito hazard via a play, so I don't think I should be complaining about realism. Anyway, thank you all so much for swinging by. I appreciate you for listening in, and let me know what your thoughts on this were. I love the discussion surrounding this. Enjoy your day, night, whenever. I will be live on Twitch tomorrow, and next week I will not have a member stream because I will be streaming for Halloween. So enjoy your day, and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.